Hello, this is the interview on France 24. Our guest today, the Director General of UNESCO, Mrs. Audrey Azoulay. Hello.
Hello.
This is Carthage. We're in the sun. It's an iconic place, isn't it?
Yes, it's an exceptional place, rich in history over the last 3 millennia. And that is just what we know about. The Phoenicians were here, and they spread their culture here throughout the Western Mediterranean region.
Yes, this midwife civilizations, as Fernand Braudel said.
Yes, it's quite exceptional what they did with their ships, exploring very far north in Europe and perhaps as far south as the Gulf of Guinea or even farther. And in fact, underwater archaeology teaches us more every day about this Phoenician society and especially the Carthaginian society. And of course, we have the famous Punic Wars, the Romans, and the Arab, Muslim, Berber civilization afterwards. This is really a cradle of that civilization, and we have not yet discovered everything about the history of humankind that we can learn. That is why these sites must be protected.
Yes.
This is indeed part of the mission of UNESCO. In fact, UNESCO has a historic campaign to save Carthage. This started in the 1970s.
Yes.
You know the famous phrase by Cato, Carthage must be destroyed, and UNESCO says Carthage must be saved to meet the challenges of today. And today this is...
Is there still work to be done?
Yes, of course. Today there is still work to be done. It's still a challenge. We're very close to a large city, to a large metropolis, and so for Carthage there's a question of construction, sometimes illegal construction. You have to inform the government regularly. The UNESCO works with the government on this question. The civil society also is engaged. And it's normal because this is a treasure for the Tunisian people,
yes,
of course, but also for humankind.
For humankind, yes.
It's like a book that we haven't finished reading yet.
Can you combine land planning and archaeology?
Indeed, this is something that we have to do. Of course, as countries develop, there are issues of land use, and we have to think about preservation. We have to think about how we can best highlight the heritage treasures. We have to look at land use plans. And UNESCO can help governments by offering our expertise, and of course by involving all of the necessary partners from the scientific community, local community, institutions, of course. But once again, this is a treasure that perhaps is still underestimated.
Now, civil society, when you talk about multilateral engagement, is civil society really involved in what UNESCO does?
You know that UNESCO is a very special place, particularly with regard to multilateralism. It was born in tragic circumstances after the Second World War, and our mandate really touches the heart of people's identity: education, culture, science, freedom of expression.
And we don't speak about it that much.
Well, we should. We should speak about it more, and we've had some interesting discussions with Tunisia about that recently. So it's something that touches people directly. We're not talking about infrastructures, institutions, or security issues. So it's a discussion that cannot take place only among states, but we have to involve scientists, educators, journalists, the local community. And UNESCO is like a mediator between politicians and state and the civil society.
Now, this role, are there obstacles? Can you play it well?
Of course, in each country the situation might be different. But I think when there is an active, involved civil society with organizations that is dynamic.
But you need good governance to have an active civil society.
Of course. The civil society has to have its place, and this is an important aspect of democracy. And what UNESCO does directly concerns people. When we do a big campaign for education of girls in Afghanistan, as we have in recent years, that changes people's lives. It changes the lives of the women and girls. And that's why we've been very concerned about what's happening in Afghanistan right now, because we don't want to slip backwards on some of these major gains that we've made with regard to women and education. And these are some of the things that are being targeted right now. But there are other subjects as well. Science.
Yes, science. I hear people wonder about science. What's the Director General of UNESCO working on AI and artificial intelligence?
This is something that concerns the whole world.
But what does UNESCO have to do with this?
UNESCO is about science and about values. These are the values that make up the UN, human rights, human dignity, and it's in our DNA at UNESCO. We need scientific development, we need scientific cooperation, but it must always be linked to our values. So one thing that's at stake, and that's why now we're working on our recommendations on ethics of artificial intelligence. How can we ensure that this development respects our values? And we have to think about it beforehand and not once these technologies are already deployed everywhere. How do we look at gender equality in AI, social bias in AI, transparency, accountability? And so now we have had experts working for 18 months on this issue, and we have brought this work together to the member states. And here you see member states and civil society working together so that they can create a joint framework on the ethics of artificial intelligence, as they did recently on the human genome.
In all this, do you have the right means?
It's not only a question of means, financial means in particular, although when you see what's at stake, of course, there's so much to be done with regard to heritage, education, and we've seen with COVID all the schools that were closed, how we've tried to help to keep education going. But I think it's very important that our members put questions of education, culture, science, freedom of expression higher up on their agenda. Because, in fact, these are what will determine in the long term whether we have peace and development for all.
Lots of people are wondering about the criteria for inclusion in on the World Heritage List. How does that work?
There is a convention that the states signed.
In 1972?
Yes, just 50 years ago.
Okay.
We'll be celebrating that. Criteria concern authenticity, preservation, commitment. And we'll have experts, archaeologists, heritage experts that come together and see if the criteria are present.
Yes.
And this 50-year anniversary will be time for us to perhaps rethink these criteria. For example, we've seen that over 50 years, there are not enough sites on the African continent on the list compared to the rest of the world. So this is something we have to work on. And then there's also a natural heritage, not only cultural heritage, but natural heritage. And how can we preserve that? That's also something that's very important. And the youth are very mobilized.
Now, as soon as I say Mosul, obviously you're going to smile. It's your project, isn't it? Is it going forward nicely?
Yes, it's going forward well. It's a project that's very important to us because it's quite symbolic. Mosul was devastated by the Islamic State group, devastated by the war, broken from within as well among the different communities when it was occupied by the Islamic State group. So our purpose is to support Iraq, to support the inhabitants of Mosul, so that they can live together in their diversity with the different religious communities within Islam or outside of Islam, to rebuild schools, universities, bookstores, a whole literary life that existed beforehand and was really crushed. And this is very important in people's lives.
That's a real challenge.
It's a challenge, and what UNESCO has done is both modest and powerful, because the city is still in ruins, but we are going forward well, thanks to the mobilization of the state that has supported us, and the rebuilding, for example, of the mosque, the Al-Abda minaret. There was an architectural competition, and thanks to the support of the Emirates, for example, we are moving forward with that, but also education, rebuilding of churches, 2 churches. We have people from all the different communities who are restoring the religious heritage of other communities. There's a festival that we're supporting, and all of this is to give people more hope in the future, and this goes through education, through heritage, and people need this, I think, in order to believe in the future peaceful coexistence.
We met in Paris in your office. We're meeting in Carthage. So we'll meet in Mosul soon.
I hope so.
Are you going to go there soon?
Absolutely. Of course, with COVID, a lot of things were put off, but this is something that we have been planning to do. And I was very happy to see that Pope Francis went to Mosul, and he went to the places that we are restoring.
Audrey Azoulay, thank you very much. Thank you, and stay with us on France 24.